Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to our cozy little corner of the internet. I'm Pen and today I'll be reading Do We Need Anything More by the Corvid Prince. It's a very soft and very fluffy Shin Soukoku fic with underlying hints of regular Soukoku and Rampo. Not Rampo the character, Rampo as in the ship, as in Rampo X Po. But anyway, here is the summary. Atsushi Nakajima's life was going very well. He had a roof over his head, a supportive group of co-workers, and a purpose in life. Everything he could have ever dreamed of when he was a starving orphan. So why does it still feel like he's missing something? Why does hearing more than anyone needs to know about Dazai and Chu's crazy sex life, or seeing Rampo and Po sneak around holding hands, make him feel so depressed? And more importantly, why do these feelings feel so much easier to deal with when he's around the Port Mafia's Ryanosuke Octogawa? Or Atsushi realizes he has more than platonic feelings for Octogawa and needs to be told that his desires in a relationship don't have to be the same as what he's seen on TV or from his co-workers. This is a very fluffy Shin Soukoku fic. I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get right in. Atsushi Nakajima prided himself on being at least somewhat knowledgeable about what he wanted out of life. He made a decent name for himself with the Armed Detective Agency, the organisation that had housed and clothed him, but had also given his life a purpose he could have never imagined a lowly author like himself capable of attaining. He could save people. He could make a real and actual difference in the world. The young man would never be grateful enough to find his not so mentally stable colleague Osamu Dazai floating in a river after another unsuccessful suicide attempt. Atsushi was planning on robbing the man of whatever money he might have had on him that day, something that brings him a great deal of shame to think about now. But instead of a few crumpled up bills or loose coins, the suicidal maniac had given the white-haired young man a greater purpose. And despite the substantial and seemingly never-ending complaints filed against the gangly, bandage-covered brunette, Atsushi would never stop thanking him for taking a chance on him. His work environment was excellent. His life felt like it had a purpose, and he had enough charm to garner himself a significant social circle of friends. The young tiger had gained a much deeper understanding of why the majority of people he runs into on a daily basis seem happy and fulfilled. But despite all his successes, Atsushi still feels like there was something quite substantial he wasn't understanding. Most of the time, he found himself happy. He had a comfortable flat that he shared with his honorary younger sister Kyoka. He could eat as much tea on rice as the tiger inside of him could stomach, which was really quite a lot. And the young man had enough free time off work to pursue potential hobbies. Atsushi should have a perfectly fulfilled life. Should be perfectly fulfilled in life, but he wasn't. Sometimes, out of the blue, the young man would be overcome with a sense of an intense depressive feeling. He would suddenly feel much more alone and detached from those around him, and he wasn't sure why it was happening to him. The feelings would come on suddenly, and it was hard to understand exactly what sparked them. But from what Atsushi could tell, it rarely happened when he was alone, only with his co-workers or observing others. When those intense feelings reared their head, the young man couldn't help but feel like he was missing something in his life. But he couldn't place a finger on exactly what that might be. It was strange. He felt like there was something missing in his life, but at the same time he felt content with the emptiness that was almost eating away at his chest. Uncertain of what to do, the young man kept his insecurities to himself, deciding it was another facet of humanity he didn't understand. Unfortunately, as time went on, and Atsushi spent more and more time with the Armed Detective Agency members, and to that extent anyone who might pose as even a slight significance the slightest bit of significance to them, the emotions would appear more frequently and linger for longer. But for whatever reason, no matter how long Atsushi was feeling down in the dumps or how bad he was feeling, there were a few instances when he found the claws of depression release their hold on him, or was distracted enough to forget about them for a moment, and somehow they all seemed to involve the Port Mafia's Ryunosuke Akutagawa. Ryunosuke and Atsushi were rivals in nearly every sense of the word. They were at each other's throats and slinging insults or punches if there was so much as in within a few feet of each other. But they were also highly effective when they collaborated, becoming almost equal power to the esteemed Double Black, which stars I belong to. And despite valiant attempts on both sides to abolish their partnership, neither the Armed Detective Agency nor the Port Mafia leaders would agree to it. So they were stuck working together, and Atsushi was stuck in a precarious situation. He constantly racked his brain for any rational explanation as to why the more violent interactions with the mafioso quelled the inherent loneliness inside. But it didn't matter how knowledgeable he thinks he might have become, any answer he came up with didn't make any sense. Someone at the agency was going to find out about how he was feeling and struggling with Akutagawa's part in it, but Atsushi never would have predicted it to happen as soon as it did, though it was really his fault for underestimating Rampo's ultra deduction. You're worrying over nothing, Atsushi," the genius detective had said rather ominously one day after completing another case for the local police department. "Excuse me?" Atsushi had responded, not entirely certain he had heard his colleague correctly. "You heard me," the black-haired man fired back, pushing his glasses to the bridge of his nose. "You just don't want to admit it, right?" Now the young man was definitely confused. He scrunched his eyebrows and averted his gaze to the unassuming stack of papers on Dazai's desk to avoid eye contact with the genius detective. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Rampo," he offers, his voice slightly shaky. Rampo scoffs in response, grabbing a piece of fruit candy and popping it into his mouth. His eyes twinkle with undefinable mystery as he chews, his gaze never relenting from staring Atsushi down. "You don't think you're subtle with all your moping around any time you see me or Ed or Dazai and Chuya," the man states. "I'm shocked you haven't tripped over yourself with how heavy your jealousy is." "I'm not jealous," Atsushi responds defensively, to which the black-haired man merely quirks an eyebrow in obvious disagreement. "Why would I be jealous?" "I can't believe I'm going to have to spell this out for you," Rampo sighs. "You're jealous because you wish you could be doing the cringy couple stuff with the object of your affection." Atsushi's head was now spinning. "The object of my what now?" "You heard me." I don't have an object of my affection," the white-haired man screeches, his cheeks tinted nearly scarlet red. Let's see," Rampo hums, smirking to himself, clearly enjoying taunting Atsushi. "He's a few years older than you, and he's also a decent amount taller than you as well." "That could describe many people I know, Rampo," the young man replies, almost uninterested. "I can diverge further if you like," the black-haired man smirks. "I was just giving you a chance to admit it before I embarrass you further." "I have nothing to admit," the young man asserts again. He's got a rather gloomy attitude, always dressed in that coat, and... Rampo smiles at his flustered colleague with a forcibly innocent smile, and he's a member of the Port Mafia. Atsushi squeaks, beelining towards the door to escape the awkward conversation. "Tell Akutagawa hi for me when you get the chance," Rampo calls after the retreating white-haired man. After a few minutes later, when Atsushi was in the safely inside his flat with his back pressed against the wall, he finally lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. What was Rampo talking about? He didn't wish to be doing all that weird couple-y stuff he'd seen on the streets and from his colleagues of Okinawa, did he? Rampo's deductions were sold him wrong. Scratch that. The genius detective had never made a wrong deduction in the time Atsushi had known him, so there had to be at least some merit to his words, despite how crazy they sounded. I can't be in love with Okinawa, can I? The white-haired man asked himself. He's him, and I'm me. Racking his brain, recalling every interaction he'd shared with the mafioso, Atsushi couldn't help but analyze everything under a lens of potentially harboring feelings for the man that he routinely, reluctantly teamed up with. Sure, it wasn't the first time they had been forced to work together. Atsushi and Okinawa were constantly at each other's throats, but with time they had developed a way of communicating, their own way of communicating and understanding one another that not even Dazai or Chuya could understand. There was an undeniable trust between the two men, something neither Okinawa nor Atsushi had the words to or courage to describe. But now that the white-haired man was attempting to understand his emotions regarding his tentative colleague, and it all seemed to be much harder to unravel. Oh God, why am I struggling like this? He groans, aggressively rubbing the back of his face with one of his hands. I wish the answers would just come to me. The pit that forms in Atsushi's stomach upon thinking of the nature of his relationship with Okinawa is more than enough to confirm Rampo's description of the young man's tribulations is correct. The white-haired man is in love with his enemy, a member of the highly dangerous Port Mafia. Though he's never been in love before, all the signs add up in his mind. So why was it so weird to think about? Many of his colleagues at the Armed Detective Agency were in some sort of romantic relationship, or at the very least had a decent understanding of what they wanted from their future relationships. Dazai and Chuya were, at the very least, having a lot of sex, which Atsushi wished he didn't have such intimate knowledge about. It seemed inherent that Rampo would be engaged to that rich American author he kept bringing around to the agency. Everyone knew Kunikita's more than detailed plans for his ideal romantic partner, even though the concept of someone being able to fulfill everything on his list seemed practically impossible. Even the Tanizaki siblings had at least some sort of understanding of being in a relationship, regrettably. The white-haired man falls to the ground of his small apartment as he threads his fingers through his hair, tugging slightly at the strands just to the point of pain before he relents. He takes a deep breath, shaky breath before lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. Atsushi places his hand on his heart, feeling the rapid pulse beneath his fingers, and sighs. It was a relatively common phenomenon when he was with Okinawa. Realistically, he knew that in itself was a major sign of his apparent attraction towards the other man, but it wasn't something that he had ever been willing to confront before. But now, given that he's been practically forced to think about this predicament, the younger man couldn't help but compare his co-workers' romantic lives to what he might want with Okinawa. He'd seen Rampo sneakily hold hands with Edgar under his desk more than a handful of times. His heart flutters as he pictures what Okinawa's hand might feel like in his own. Atsushi had already noted the man had long, slender fingers on many of the missions they were forced to partake together, but he couldn't help but wonder if the mafioso's hands would be chilly, especially compared to how the tiger's blood in Atsushi's vein made him run a little bit warmer. Good God, do I want to find out? Good God, do I want to find out? He finds himself whispering to himself. There was no doubt in his mind that Akutagawa applied lotion to his hands. Aside from the chronic cough that seemed and his seemingly lack of eyebrows, the younger tiger had never spotted any blemishes or any physical flaws in the other man. The young tiger grins at the thought of the cool, long, well-manicured fingers tangling in his own. Soon enough, just the thought of holding the other's hand isn't enough for the young tiger's head. Before long, there's an entire scene in his mind. He and Akutagawa walking together, side by side, holding hands and beaming at one another. They meander through the streets, engrossed in meaningless conversation. Perhaps they'd duck into a tea shop and tangle their feet together as they shared details of their respective workdays over a cup of Earl Grey. Atsushi feels his cheeks burn in shame as he realizes how ridiculous the images in his head were becoming, as if the mafioso would ever be that soft or loving in real life. No, his brain was merely sick and in love, but he can't help but allow himself the delusion of that situation potentially happening one day. The young man closes his eyes, releasing a deep sigh as he further feeds into his delusions, into the delusions his brain provides him with. He can easily picture him and Akutagawa exchanging soft kisses from the prying eyes of their workplace, or sharing a couch or bed. Their limbs tangled together until they become nearly indistinguishable from one another. A slew of romantic scenarios pass through Atsushi's mind, each one causing the white-haired man's cheeks to burn a little hotter or tint slightly redder. However, one thing distinctively lacks from his countless longing wishes for activities to do with the mafioso. Each and every one of his thoughts could be considered fluffy or only slightly domestic. There was a distinct lack of anything glued or steamier than a short peck on the lips. Atsushi certainly knows about that. Atsushi certainly knows about that being a English. A significant staple of some relationships. Thanks to Dazo's non-stop bragging or complaining about all the things Chuya has done or would do to him. He decides the reason nothing of that caliber comes to his mind is that he's too green when it comes to anything remotely hinting at a relationship. Perhaps if he were a stronger man, he would have the courage to ask Dazai why he's so confident in proclaiming how much he likes submitting to Chuya. But given how the younger tiger felt no need to be traumatized by his mentor or getting teased for his naivety when it came to anything sex-related, Atsushi decided it was best to stay quiet. Though he still had many questions about the things he would rather do in... Okay, English, please work. Please. Okay. He still had many questions and things about that he would rather feel a little bit more comfortable in these relationships. He would rather feel a little more confident about regarding his relationship with Akutagawa. Atsushi decides that he's had enough of fretting for the day and crawls under his covers, falling into a peaceful slumber with relative ease. Unfortunately, when the man awakens, he drags himself to the office the next day. His nosy co-workers are even nosier than in previous instances. The young man really should have been more careful in hiding any trace of last night's revelations from his body language and overall demeanor. Atsushi! He feels Dazai's arm circle around his shoulder before he sees the man, which he eventually gets to strain his neck to glare at his mentor. a telltale knowing smirk planted on the brunette's face, and for once the white-haired man is positive the following words are not going to be a grand tale of how Chuya had pleasured him last night. "What did you do last night?" the detective questions him instead, even though it's evident to both of them that Dazai knows more than he's letting on. Atsushi averts his gaze, becoming much more fascinated with the floor rather than maintaining eye contact with the much too smart Dazai. He could easily lie, but he knows it wouldn't be worth it. His colleague would see right through any fib he could fabricate in that instance. "Nothing much," the white-haired boy mumbles, barely audible. "Why do you ask?" Dazai's arm disappears from around his neck, and Atsushi manages to flee a few steps away before the taller man grabs him by the back of his shirt and hoisting him in the air like a newborn kitten. "Don't think you can escape from this," the elder teases, lightly laughing under his breath as Atsushi squirms and kicks his feet in a useless attempt to escape. "Can't you leave the poor kid alone?" Kunikita's annoyed voice comes from the other side of the office. From the state he's in, it's obvious he didn't get an ideal amount of sleep for a young man his age. Atsushi rolls his eyes at his partner. "That's precisely why I have to do this, Kunikita. I need answers." Then, to Atsushi, he smirks. "Meet up with anyone in particular last night?" Rumpo scoffs before Atsushi has a chance to respond. "And here I thought the great Osamu Dazai was smarter than this." The detective snaps his head back towards the black-haired man who is stuffing his face with assorted sweets. "What are you on about, Rumpo?" Dazai's eyes flick back to Atsushi for a moment. "What am I missing?" Rumpo decides not to give his colleague anything remotely helpful as a response. He only shrugs his shoulders and mumbles something about not being as exciting if Dazai had to be hold his hand. If he had to hold Dazai's hand through this. "I'll get to the bottom of this," the brunette mumbles under his breath as Rumpo retreats from the room, refocusing the bulk of his attention on Atsushi instead. "I didn't meet up with anyone last night," the young tiger asserts, still squirming against the hold Dazai's hold on the scruff of his neck. "But that doesn't make sense at all," the other man pouts, finally getting his younger subordinate back onto the ground. Surely all the signs finally came together in that stupid little head of yours, and oh my god, I really am stupid." Atsushi didn't like that he had been some part. Okay. Let's attempt that again. Atsushi doesn't like that he has some part in his colleague figuring out himself to be stupid. "Do I even want to know?" he asks reluctantly. Dazai throws his arm around Atsushi's neck and beams at him, something the white-haired man definitely knows better than to trust at face value. "I have a mission for you," he smirks. It's very, very important." There's not a single truthful word that comes from Dazai's mouth, but Atsushi can't seem to find the energy to care to deny whatever ridiculous request his superior is planning to ask of him. "What is the mission, Dazai?" he asks plainly. "For your mission, you're going to need to travel across Yokohama." The taller man gestures wildly around the room, "to the depths of the Port Mafia territory." Sorry. Atsushi's heart sinks into his chest. He has a sickening suspicion he knows where this is going. "Why do you need me to go to Port Mafia territory?" The white-haired man slightly hesitates as he responds. "Aren't you much more suited doing that, considering you're the one in an actively in some sort of relationship with someone in the Port Mafia?" goes unsaid for obvious reasons. "I should scold you for your careless assumptions about me, Darzai teased, but I think the mission itself will embarrass you enough. Atsushi groans for what he feels like is the 1,000th time that day. He knows what his colleague is up to, but he will not confront him about it. That would mean he needs to admit his newly realized feelings for Okutagawa aloud, and there's no way in hell he's going to do that, right now at least. Do I even dare ask what this mission you want me to go on is? The white-haired man asks, hesitating to even make eye contact with the other man. Predictably, Darzai's smug grin does wonders for the nervous wreck of a tiger boy. You're going to go into the depths of the Port Mafia territory and find Okutagawa, he explains. Then you're going to pour your poor little heart out, and soon enough we'll have little were-tiger kittens running around the agency. I can't believe I said that all wrong. Okay. Atsushi's cheeks significantly darken as he turns away from his superior. You didn't have to word it like that, he mumbles. He soon met with Darzai's hand on his shoulder, patting him on the back and grinning. You got this. There's only like a 60% chance Rashomon rips you apart when you confess your feelings. The taller man is now pushing Atsushi towards the door. Now get going. Atsushi feels his scalding cheeks with the back of his hand and sighs. Darzai had left him alone in the hallway. If he really wanted to, he could just duck out of the building and go nowhere near the Port Mafia territory. But he'd be lying if he said he didn't want to find some sort of release from the relentless pounding in his heart. Oh, for God's sake, Rampo's voice comes from behind the white-haired man, startling him. You look miserable. Rampo? Atsushi greets his other colleague with a certain amount of uncertainty of what might... Trepidation, there we go. Trepidation. Uncertain of what he might want from him or what advice he was going to offer against his feelings towards Okutagawa. Darzai really did mess with your head, didn't he? The black-haired man chuckles. He also offered you advice that isn't the most useful to you, but you can't blame him for that. He doesn't have any experience with that sort of thing. Now Atsushi was even more confused than he was before. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Aren't Darzai and Chuya... I'm not sure what you're talking about, he responds. Aren't Darzai and Chuya having much more sex than anyone needs to know about? Rampo finishes. Yes, they are. They are also disgustingly in love with each other, and I'm not sure which is worse. But Darzai and Chuya's relationship is much different from what Ed and I... than that of Ed and I. And I suspect you want... And what I suspect you want from your relationship with Okutagawa. The young tiger man cocks his head to the side in confusion. And I know all relationships are different. That's to be expected when everyone is different. But there aren't the same But aren't there the same fundamental things in all relationships? He asks, becoming a little more flustered at his naivety on the subject, increasingly becoming more apparent. Going on dates and kissing and sex? Wrong, Rampo responds immediately. Wrong? Atsushi questions. What do you mean? The genius detective rolls his eyes again and sighs. I never thought I would have to explain this, but the president is gone, so I guess I'm qualified to pass on the knowledge he gave me. Rampo takes Atsushi by the arm and guides him into the armed detective agency's small break room. He hands the younger man one of his favourite candy bars and gestures to take a seat. Once Atsushi is seated, the older man perches on the table with his legs crossed, popping a lollipop in his mouth. So, the man's voice is only slightly muffled by the lollipop in his mouth. There's a lot of stupid stuff Okay, let me try that again. There's a lot of stupid stuff that a lot of the dumb public likes to think is necessary in any relationship, but they're all just wrong. How do you mean? The white-haired man asks, his fingers slightly trembling as he opens the chocolate bar. He delicately places a corner in his mouth while waiting for Rumpo's response. Well, let's use Zaza and Chuya as an example. They were fucking on and off before they were smart enough to realize they were head over heels in love with each other. Wow? Atsushi gasps. I thought they were just dancing around each other this whole time. Rumpo laughs. For some people, the sex is all they ever want. Everything they could need for a partner is satisfied with just a physical act. And for others, sex isn't necessary to have a healthy relationship dynamic. The genius smiles again warmly. Take me and Ed, for example. We don't ever want to have sex. We just get everything we need from spending time with each other, holding hands, or sleeping in the same bed. Atsushi is astounded. That's possible? He gasps. That's amazing. Rumpo laughs under his breath. Anything you could ever want out of a relationship is possible, Atsushi. You just have to be able to communicate with Akutagawa what the both of you want. The detective's features lighten as he offers the white-haired man a genuine smile. Don't worry about figuring out exactly what you want right away. Daza and Chuya are one example, the physical attraction driving them to each other. Ed and I are the other extreme, not having any desire or physical attraction towards one another. You're probably somewhere in the middle. Maybe you'll find yourself that you'll want to have sex with Akutagawa one day, or maybe you won't. Either is fine, as long as you two openly talk about it. Atsushi's eyes are still wide with intrigue. How on earth are you so knowledgeable in this stuff? He finds himself asking. Rumpo scoffs under his breath. Like I said, the old man taught me. He took way too long in assuring that I wasn't broken for not wanting the more physical parts of. Okay, and he took way too long ensuring that I knew I wasn't broken for not wanting some of the more physical parts of a relationship. The black-haired man places a hand on Atsushi's shoulder and slightly smiles. He looks much more serious than usual. And most importantly, Rumpo states sternly, don't change yourself to impress a man, let alone a man from a rival group. You are worthy of love if you wanted a lot. You are worthy of the love you want. Whether it entails sex, kissing, dates, or cuddling, all of it or none of it, never convince yourself otherwise. The detective is pushing the younger white-haired man towards the door before he can respond. Atsushi has several choices. He could just forget about the whole thing, about everything Rumpo and Daza had encouraged him, curling up with a good book in his bed instead. But he knew that wouldn't get him anywhere. He knew how to sleep How could he sleep after countless hours of confusion? He had an answer for his feelings of Ryunosuke Akutagawa. He finally had an answer for what his feelings for Ryunosuke Akutagawa, his rival and tentative partner, meant. Atsushi has hardly had enough time to even be somewhat confident in his decision to confess his whatever it was he was feeling for the old man, before he realizes his feet had unknowingly led him into Port Mafia territory. And unluckily for the young tiger, the man he's looking for has already spotted him. Tendrils of Rashomon elegantly carrying Akutagawa from the roof of a nearby rooftop, only hovering a few feet above his unexpected visitor. As always, the mafioso's expression is unreadable, but Atsushi can sense his confusion. Why are you here, Jinko? As soon as Atsushi sees the familiar figure in front of him, he freezes in place. His face a mixture of frozen in a mixture of fear, anger, and confusion. His heart is racing so fast that it defaults to becoming defensive the moment Dr. Gower is involved. You first. What are you doing here? He knows it makes no sense, but surely the universe would forgive the poor naive tiger boy for being a little uncertain about how to act around his first crush. Was that even what Octagao was to him? He wasn't entirely sure. Octagao's eyebrows bunch together, and his face turns into an even more puzzled expression. You're the one that came into Port Mafia territory, he observes. You're not usually here unless you have a mission, but if there were, Chia would have informed me by now, which means you came here for some other reason. God damn Octagao and his all-know-it attitude. How the ever-loving fuck was Atsushi meant to change the topic to something so intimate? Atsushi's heart skips a beat as he realizes the older man might have the upper hand in this situation. Octagawa is clearly onto him, and no matter how hard he tries to cover his tracks, it feels like the older man will figure out what his intentions are no matter what. So he starts stuttering. Oh, well, I suppose you're right. I came here to find you. He feels a sudden surge of fear as he watches Octagawa's expression become confused and cautious. You came here to find me. Octagawa echoes like the mere thought of the young man looking for him baffles him. Why? The white-haired man hesitates before answering, his face tinged with embarrassment. Well, he trails off, unsure of how to continue. Wanted to talk with you. Rashomon dissipates into Octagawa's coat, and Atsushi soon finds two cool grey eyes staring him down as if he could see straight to the young tiger into his heart. Maybe it'll be easier if Octagawa could understand precisely what he wanted to say, so he didn't have to embarrass himself like this. What did you want to talk to me about? Octagawa asks, his voice softer than what Atsushi is used to, almost like the man is trying to be approachable for the white-haired man's sake. Atsushi sighs softly as he lowers his gaze to the ground, looking as embarrassed as he felt. Well, the thing is, he falters again as he tries to find the right words, his face grows even hotter as he struggles to find the right words to express his feelings for the older man. He was not looking forward to putting this into words, knowing full well how awkward this would make things between them. But the desperation to get rid of this terrible secret is getting greater. Oh, for fuck's sake, just spit it out, Atsushi, Octagawa exclaims, grabbing the young man's shirt and gently shaking him. You're shaking like a goddamn leaf. That was the first time the other man had referred to him by his actual name instead of Jinko or Were-Tiger. Atsushi's eyes widen in shock as he's suddenly grabbed by the old man and shaken like a rag doll. He probably would have collapsed on the spot without a firm grip on his shoulders. He looks at Octagawa in belief, unsure of how his next words will forever impact his life. I was trying to tell you. Octagawa stares unblinkingly at Atsushi, waiting for the younger man to finish whatever he needs to say. He probably could have moved his hands away from Atsushi's shoulders by now, but for whatever reason they stayed there. His knuckles slightly whitish in hue as he grips the younger tiger on. Okay. His knuckles are slightly whitish in hue as his grip on the tiger does not relent. Atsushi gulps as he feels Octagawa grip his shoulders and finds himself unable to move on his own. He hated that he was like this, stuttering entirely at the mercy of his feelings and unable to even get his point across. I'm trying to tell you that I like you. Shockingly enough, the world itself doesn't implode as Atsushi finally manages to squeeze the words out of his mouth. However, it might as well have been, because he's not sure if he can survive with all the possible meanings of the genuine shock on Akutagawa's face. The man had become even paler than usual, his mouth slightly agape. The mafioso chews on the words, his face painted with all sorts of confusion. Like me? Atsushi couldn't help but smile as he noticed the other man's reaction. Maybe he had underestimated his effect on the older man, and was now amused and satisfied that Akutagawa's shock did not come from disgust but confusion. Uh-huh, he confirmed, leaning closer to the man, trying to gauge if their relationship stood, and not wanting to scare the older man by coming on too strong. Akutagawa did not immediately jump away from Atsushi's sudden closeness, which was a much better reaction than what the younger man was anticipating. Instead, the black-haired man scoffs under his breath, lightly swallowing a cough before he continues. For how long? There's still not obvious a trace of emotion in the mafioso's response. Atsushi's heart beats faster as he realizes the question of not a what, but a how long, which leaves him somewhat confused on how to respond. Did the older man want a definite time period or a vague explanation? Either way, he takes a deep breath before settling for what he feels would further this discussion. Well, I think it was a month or two ago when I realized that I liked you, and not just as a colleague or rival. Akutagawa's eyes raised in confusion, as if he wasn't sure how it was possible for him not to have noticed that Atsushi's emotions towards him had changed. The mafioso turns to face the slightly shorter man and cocks his head to the side. The way you like me, is it romantic in nature? The question that Atsushi really ought to have been more prepared for, but for whatever reason his mind draws a blank. Realistically, he knew he should have had the words to express this Akutagawa, what he was talking to Rampo about with Rampo earlier, but he wasn't sure how he could do it. How could he manage to tell the man who was supposed to be his rival that he was pretty sure he was in love with him, but not in a manner portrayed in the media? Atsushi's cheeks flush as he desperately tries to find the words to describe his muddled feelings in his head. I'm not sure, he admits, averting his gaze from the steely grey eyes that seem to dig into him, reading his every thought and prying for more information. His mind produces several thousand overlapping thoughts at once, and it's all just slightly too much for him to process properly. Realistically, he should have been more prepared for questions or challenges to his confession, or at the very least come up with a suitable answer to such an obvious question. But in typical Atsushi Nakajima style, he was going to go through this on nothing but pure instinct. You're not sure, Akutagawa responds, sounding more amused than upset or disappointed. How can you not be sure when you're saying you like me? Because I don't know how to describe my feelings. Atsushi bursts out without another thought, all his internal turmoil spilling in his mouth in one constant stream of thought. I want to go on silly little dates with you and cuddle you and hold your hand, and maybe I want to kiss you, but I don't think I'll ever want to do more than that. More than that? The other man questions, meaning sex, correct? Atsushi can only nod, finding himself suddenly unable to speak. The tears well up in his eyes as it takes all the effort in the world for the white-haired man to make eye contact with Akutagawa. He was expecting hatred, confusion, or some horrid combination of both. What he was not expecting, however, was the mafioso to look so soft, He wasn't necessarily smiling, but his face no longer held the usual scornful look that he had grown used to seeing on Akutagawa. "Are you done yet?" the taller man asks, no particular emotion discernible in his voice. Atsushi was not expecting Akutagawa's reaction or softness of the other man's voice, Feeling slightly more comfortable with the lack of hostility, he nods his head in response to the older man's question. As he watches the other man's face for any additional sign of emotions, he manages to speak again. Yes, I think I'm done." "Very well," Akutagawa says, lightly coughing into his hand. "I suppose you would like to know that I also happen to view you in high regard." Was this the mafioso's way of saying he returned Atsushi's feelings? The young tiger wasn't sure what to make of that response. Atsushi's breath grew heavier as he considered the other man's response. "You view me in high regard?" It would surely be ridiculous if that were the extent of the older man's feelings, but at the same time the young tiger couldn't help but be cautious. His mind was already spinning in different directions, in different possible interpretations of Akutagawa's words, but he couldn't decide on the one that made the most sense. But luckily for the younger man, the black-haired man chose to speak again. Do I need to say it again so it permeates that thick tiger brain of yours?" The mafioso chuckles under his breath. I don't promise to stop killing for just anyone, foolish Jinko." And there it was, solid, concrete proof that Akutagawa returned Atsushi's feelings. The white-haired man's eyes shimmer with the light of the stars as he throws his arms around Akutagawa's middle. A choked sob tears itself from his throat as the mafioso tentatively wraps his arms around Atsushi in return. "What does this mean for us?" he asks a few minutes later, while both men's grips around each other had loosened enough to talk face to face. "It can mean whatever we want it to mean," Akutagawa whispers, gently threading his fingers through Atsushi's hair. "And you're fine with," the white-haired man trails off. "Not having sex ever? I mean, maybe I want to at some point, but right now I don't think I want to. And maybe I never. If I wasn't alright with it, I wouldn't have told you, you fool." Akutagawa interrupts, brushing a sizable portion of Atsushi's hair behind his ears and smiles as he gazes into the other man's eyes. "The only thing I want out of our relationship is that the two of us and whatever life we decide to make for ourselves." Atsushi's eyes widen a little as he squeezes the other man's hand in his own. He could hardly believe this was real, but as he felt Akutagawa's hand in his own, just as cool, soft, and well manicured as he'd imagined, he knew that no dream could replicate this utter perfection. "Just the two of us?" he whispers, leaning closer to Akutagawa. Rashomon wraps around Atsushi's waist, bringing the two men impossibly closer. "Do we need anything more?" Okay, everyone, that was the one shot. Do we need anything more? I hope you guys like this because this just warmed my heart so much. Usually this author writes either smut or angst, but this one, and I found another one that I really liked. It's just so wholesome. And anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to take care of yourself. I'll be keeping an eye on you. Yes, you, Jacob. I don't know who you are, but Jacob. Oh god, I'm pulling a click. As in the Click the YouTuber. Okay, I'm keeping that in. Fuck it. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, thank you for staying around with me. Your support means the world to me. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Bye.